Hey guys, welcome back to IDP Plus Trends. I am Johnny Freaking Fantasy. I am co-hosting tonight with the IDP tipster Gary Van Dyke. Thank you all for joining us. We are going to talk about our second tier of free agent linebackers. If you missed our first tier, hopefully you're here because you saw it. But if you didn't, please go back and watch that. That was great stuff. That was actually mine and Gary's first recorded podcast together. And he gave me a vote of confidence that I did so well that I am hosting now my first podcast ever. You are making history. Let's go ahead, Gary.
And for those of you that know me, I'm the old fart out here that does this all the time. Yeah, the first opportunity I got was get out of that hosting chair, brother. Johnny, you're a natural, man. And I'm telling you, people are going to see what I'm talking about. They just keep checking out these podcasts over the next few weeks, the rest of this off season. We're going to be here every week, and you can get so much Johnny freaking fantasy football that you ain't going to be able to stand it. Let's roll, brother.
Let's get it. Before we start with our second tier, if you are playing in a fantasy championship, if you're playing in a fantasy league and you won the championship, if you're having a thing at work, if you want to get a trophy for work, maybe for your kids' little league baseball, if you want to get them a trophy or a belt, go over to trophysmack.com and use the promo code with any purchase. Actually, you have to purchase a belt or a trophy specifically. If you buy a belt or a trophy from Trophy Smack and use the promo code IDP, guys, they will give you a free ring with that belt or trophy purchase. And you know what? I don't know about you, Gary, but I got a lot of little league trophies. When I was playing baseball, soccer as a kid, I wish those were those belts. Those WWE almost belts that they had. Those would be cool hanging on my wall instead of those trophies.
That would be sweet as hell. A bunch of 5-6-year-olds running around with little belts on, right? For their t-ball team. Oh, that would be sweet. I never thought of that, man. That's a great idea.
Yeah, so I think that's a good rep for Trophy Smack right there. Maybe they should sign me too on a side note. But yeah, if you are looking for a trophy, hopefully because you won your league and you want to go brag on your friends, go to Trophy Smack, check them out, and get some swag, get some gear. But we're going to go ahead and get into our second tier of free agent inside linebackers. We gave you 6 before. Those were, if you missed it, Patrick Queen, Jordan Brooks, Devin White, Frankie Louvu, and Kenneth Murray. We are going to keep moving on to our second tier. And the important the stress I want to put on this next part is scoring. So our scoring here, our important parameters we are looking at this from an IDP dynasty perspective. So, which means a lot of the guys that we forewent, like the Levante Davids, the Bobby Wagners, those guys on their way out, older guys, we went ahead and ruled them out of our list. So you won't see actually anybody over 30 on our list. So that was a little prelude into what we are going to talk about. We're going to continue to drop that knowledge on you. We're going to go in here and get started with our second tier. And if you are ready, Gary, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah, brother. Let's rock and roll, man.
Our first guy on the second tier. And to me, I had to have him on this list. We talked about some other guys that could have made this list. But to me, I went out and stuck my neck out for this guy. So you better show up next year. And that's Blake Cashman from Houston. I really like Blake Cashman. He was traded from the Jets in 2022. He only ended up playing 149 snaps last year in his first year. Fast forward to 2023. Now we got the Miko Ryans, right? We got new energy in the team, in the locker room. He had a great year. He had a career year by his means. This is his 5th year in the league. I really liked him personally. Coming into the draft, coming into the league, I really liked him. I thought he was a sure tackler, somebody who can not only be good in pass protection and tackle well, but somebody that blitzes really well too. And if you listen to the first tier, you heard us talk about two guys, Devin White and Frankie Louvu, who were similar to like the kind of build that Blake Cashman is, the type of player that he is. So, we're not only showing love to tackle heavy guys here. We want to highlight guys that can do it all. And me personally, I think Blake Cashman is one of those guys. I'm going to drop some stats on you. among 55 linebackers with at least 50 plus tackles, his 7% missed tackle rate is top 15 amongst those linebackers. His 79.7, so we'll call it 80% coverage grade, ranks 15th. Over his last 2 seasons, he's had 19 total pressures, 5 sacks, 5 quarterback hits on only 94 rushes, and he's only played 14 games. So to me, you might look at track record and say, Johnny, it's not all there. To me, I look at it and I say, the guy finally got an opportunity. He has less wear and tear on his body. I really like Blake Cashman, whether it's here or going somewhere else to fill a void. Hopefully it's here because maybe things clicked with, D'Amico Ryans and the rest of that team. But I'm high on Blake Cashman. Gary, do you feel that same feeling?
Well, I'm glad you pulled for the guy because I was the one to come up with the jump off list for the top 12 and said, take it from there. So you were actually listening to Johnny freaking Fantasy's, his second tier. And I have to agree. I think he took Nicholas Morrow out for me because I had cut off at the age limit and such. You took it from there and got this thing hooked up for it like this. And Blake Cashman, the guy, it makes you wonder if he would have gotten an opportunity and could have stayed healthy at the same time when he was in New York, what he could have been by now. I mean, if this guy has been just under development all this freaking time, and just that's all he needed was his opportunity with Bryant. I mean, the only thing that's cluster screwing this up for me is the fact that, you got Christian Harris sitting there and they can't seem to quit doing him. You got to figure what Denzel Perriman's gone, right?
Right.
Because as you can see, I'm alluding to, I don't think Houston lets this guy walk.
I don't think so.
All. Yeah, I mean, this guy, I could see them just handing him a nice, happy 3 or 4 year contract and just letting him. And I think that he probably feels pretty good with Demarcus Ryans and Houston right now, to the fact that he, why change the rainbow somewhere else as long as they pay him decently? He doesn't need an outrageous payday here.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I'm somebody who I'm nitty and gritty with my research. Finding an article from 2 weeks ago just doesn't cut it for me. So, a lot of times I'll take a name into Twitter and Blake Cashman, for example. I've done that. And it seems like a lot of people there are a lot of fans in Houston are saying like, we need to revamp our linebacker core. And at the same time, there's just as many people telling them like, hey, pump the brakes. We've got something good here. Like you said, Christian Harris, he was a force towards the end of the season, going into the playoffs, even into the playoffs. Blake Cashman, the only thing though I want to say is I think as great as he can be there, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because they had a couple good linebackers. Like you said, Denzel Perryman was eating up snaps. Maybe if he leaves, this changes. But for me, I felt like wronged with Blake Cashman and really any of the Houston, linebackers this season, because it seemed like 1 week they played 100% of snaps. Things were looking good. And all of a sudden, like next week, it changed to 202 or Henry, 202, that rookie. Like, they almost had like 3 or 4 linebackers. They didn't know what they were doing. What did you think about that situation, Gary?
Well, when I was doing my start sits back during the season, man, it was interesting to watch those exact snap counts every week go up and down. You'd have to check who was injured, who wasn't injured. And that basically, Blake Cashman, when he got his window, and I think it was probably around week 5 or 6 or something.
He had a good week 3. He didn't show up on the stats sheet for the first 2 weeks. Week 3, he had 6 tackles. Week 4, he went back to 2 tackles. And then, week 5, he gets 9. Week 6, before the bye, he gets 15 tackles. So that's, right. Good games there. 3 games, but tough to gauge.
Right. Yeah. He got that stretch where he started filling in. I think that's when Denzel Perriman either got suspended or he got hurt or he did some dumbass move or something. But he fit in there for a few weeks where he was just tearing it up. And that's where he started taking notice. But I believe he also experienced his own little injury that hampered him. And then at the same time, when they brought Denzel Perriman back in, you had Christian Harris, which again, I mean, I got to give kudos to the guy, if you're looking from an IDP perspective, the guy is, he's productive by default, but on film, I mean, he spent the first part of the season graded like in the 30s or something on PFF. I mean, he just wasn't holding his own. So maybe he's developed a little bit. And all of these guys can continue to develop, including two. You can't take that guy out either. They had some decent draft stock in him, so he wasn't a failure. He was a rookie. That's pretty much how that stacks up. Christian Harris was thrown into the fire as a rookie. Cashman's just a journeyman. It's got experience, and he's had time to fine tune himself. He's to step in. Nobody could have predicted this. I couldn't. I mean, you might as well hit the lottery to think that. I mean, there's some of those calls every year, but if you looked at any of us analysts, if you look at a pro NFL analyst, unless it was a deep guy inside to the Titans room, I couldn't imagine there's too many people go, oh yeah, we'll be talking about Blake Cashman as an elite prospect for any team. Somebody could surprise us and take him, come in and offer him a big one. But I think DeMarco Ryans is going to make sure that he keeps this guy there while he builds up this defense and this team for the next year or two.
And you know what? I want to echo that kudos to DeMeco Ryans and the whole organization because, they've done a real good job of, unfortunately for us, it's a log jam. It's a bad problem to have, but for the Houston Texans, it's a great problem to have that many linebackers, the fluidity they have there, how they can sub them in and out. That's a great problem to have. And you know what? 202, he's a rookie. He's from Alabama. So is DeMeco Ryans. Christian Harris, second year, Alabama. So is DeMeco Ryans. So it's like those guys I don't think are going anywhere. So, it's not a backfield. It's not a position like Ernest Jones has. Ernest Jones is like somebody on that team on the Rams who has like really snaps to himself. I think their second linebacker was like Christian Robesboom, and he was less than 50% of snaps as the LB2. So I don't think those two guys are going anywhere, but at the same time, like it might be a byproduct of just good coaching and knowing how to get your guys because Houston Texans, they're sitting on top. We as fantasy analysts are saying like Blake Cashman, you burned me. Christian Harris, where was that all year? Maybe DeMeco Ryans, that team was just so smart that they knew what they had. They were just looking at how to put them in the right place. And look what they did at the end, right? So they just kind of took off as a defense, as a team. So they found themselves. And I think, that's really speaks volumes on the coaching, on the organization. And, unfortunately for us, we were week to week left in that conundrum. But I think Blake Cashman, if they bring him back, which they should, because they don't have problems, quite frankly, to me at linebacker. They got solutions, right? And Blake Cashman is one of them. So I think he's an anchor. I'm excited to see, he's not somebody that's just going to get tackles. Let's take a look here over the last 2 years. Blake Cashman, he's had 9 tackles for loss this year, 4 playing only 149% snaps or 149 snaps total last year. So that's 13 over the last 2 years, 5 sacks over the last, 1 and then some years. So this is a guy who can do it all. He went for in just 14 games played, he had 106 tackles. So that's great averages right there. He had a game week 6, he had 15 tackles. Week 11, he had a 19 tackle game and a sack. So we're talking about a guy who, has had count on your handful of times how many a top 10 linebacker finish in Blake Cashman. So, like Gary said, really underappreciated guy, somebody who didn't get a chance really. And he did have splashes. I'll say, like when I saw in New York, he did have a couple games there where it's like he looked bad as an analyst because I'm like, oh, Blake Cashman, he had 12 tackles, go pick him up. And then next couple weeks, it was like,
he's hurt,
right,
or hurt. Yeah. It was a terrible little ride. I mean, there was some expectations there. An injury just took us all out. And what was interesting too is we'll just lead right in that when I was looking into Josey Jewell, which you have next on this list, talking about a best fit or something, the first thing that come across doing the research was some reports or some articles on the fact that how people would like to see Blake Cashman in Denver. So you could imagine a switch out with Josey Jewell somewhere else. Josey Jewell's been a pretty good option for the last few years after getting healthy. What's your outlook for him this coming year?
You know what? It's tough. Josey Jewell, he's somebody who's an anchor of a defense. He's a good leader. He has great instincts. He's not the most athletic. I think this could be like a good cheap signing. Not in the sense of like dirt minimum, but you give this guy a couple $1 million. You're looking for stability at that linebacker position. He's a vocal leader. He's a great tackler. We even saw him getting some sacks. He had 3 sacks this year in 16 games, so that was nice. Josey Jewell, he's not you're not getting him to break the sack record. He's 236 tackles, 5.5 sacks. He's 9 tackles for loss, which isn't great. This is over his career, but I'm sorry, over the last 2 years. So tackles for loss, he's not somebody that's really getting to the quarterback, making plays behind the line too much. But he is a playmaker. With that being said, over those last 2 years, 4 forced fumbles, 5 recoveries. He's had 2 picks. So like I said, that instinctive play, I think, plays somewhere else if it's not Denver. Right. If he's going to give them a little bit of a discount to bring him back because he has a spot there. And one thing I do want to say is Alex Singleton, like him and Alex Singleton are tight. And Alex Singleton's really on him. I read some articles saying Alex Singleton's really on him to re-sign. I don't know that this is, somebody that can go and have a great career elsewhere. Like, to me, I think he really knows. Gary mentioned a good point earlier. You have to learn a new playbook if you go somewhere else. So he knows what he's doing there. I just don't think that they're so far off. Maybe they ride the wave with Wilson for another year or two. And I think Josey Jewell's an integral part of that defense right now. What do you think, Gary?
When it comes to Denver, I mean, him and Elway have been loyal to each other, him and Denver have been loyal to each other. They put, Josey Jewell kept getting his opportunities back when he was injured early on in his career. And he's not outpriced himself. Okay. He's a good, solid guy. He's a big, integral part of this interior defense, but at the same time, we also watch his snap counts drop a little bit this year because he was working in what's that other I can't remember his name, former Ohio State guy, edge rusher.
You're not talking about Drew Sanders, are you?
No, that's their 3rd rounder from last year or something like that. Yes, Browning. I'm a Ohio State guy, dude. I don't know how in the hell I couldn't. So yeah, if you actually look at their stat counts, I mean, when they started bringing him in, when Baron Browning started to come in, then Josey Jewell did fluctuate a little bit. He wasn't playing as much. I'm not sure if they're going to look at Josey Jewell as the fact that he's a must-have. So there'll probably be some wiggle room there on negotiations between them. I don't think that they're going to do more than I don't want to say a hometown discount, but I don't think he's going to get $10 million a year out of him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. So, but Baron Browning, he's a conundrum in himself because I'm not sure if he's a free agent or if he's been a free agent, but he's been a thorn in the side this year of a couple of players. He also affected the other linebacker, outside linebacker, not Cooper, but the other dude across from him was doing just as well as he was. And then he fell off about halfway through when Baron Browning came back out. I never did the work with him.
Baron Browning in 2021 signed a 4-year, $4.7 million deal. So he's good until at least next year. Okay, so Josey Jewell, the thing is, in Dynasty, I'd like to see him get re-signed. To me, like, that's where, that's kind of like why he's higher on my tier 2 list. I'm not banking on 3 to 5 years with Josey Jewell, frankly, because just the type of player he is. We talk about guys that didn't make this list, Bobby Wagner, Levante David. Those guys are still playing elite levels, but they're 33, 34 years old. If you ask me, Josey Jewell at 32, 33, I don't think he is on an NFL team. That's just my opinion. I think at that point, the instincts, that doesn't cut it. We are at a time where the NFL is trying to get, bigger, faster, stronger at all positions. So, with guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, those guys making big plays, somebody's got to tackle them, right? So Josey Jewell for me is more of like a 1 or 2 good years left. I think, especially if he stays in Denver, I think he could have value elsewhere. He's a sure tackler, and that's my bankable stat in fantasy is tackles. So I do think that will be available for him. But I just don't want to see to a point where, he becomes slower. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Father Time doesn't catch up too fast. But at some point, if you're not the most athletic, it's going to show. So Josey Jewell, best case scenario for me is if he re-signs, he's another good, 1 or 2 year plays. But if he does re-sign on a 1 or 2 year deal, like I don't really have hesitations about him. You could look at maybe he's missed a few games. Sure. I get you there. But to me, Josey Jewell is a good source of tackles, especially in Denver. How about you, Gary?
Yeah, especially staying in Denver, and him and Alex Alex Singleton signed such a big enough contract. He could probably just, foot a little towards Josey Jewell's way if those two are buddy. But however that worked out, however that works out.
So good at making tackles. They could just have that one linebacker play with 10 men.
No shit. I do like what Denver did with their defense this year, man. And the other edge rusher that I might have mentioned a little bit ago was a Bonanno.
Oh, Nick Bonito.
Him and Cooper were both like really breaking out at the beginning of the season, and when Baron Browning came in, and he started getting in the mix, man, he was seeing mix off the edge, and he was playing a little bit of inside linebacker. I think that's why Josey Jewell fluctuated a little bit. It's an interesting scenario. Again, Josey Jewell did not outprice himself, though.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a good problem to have for Denver there. Maybe he didn't, doesn't build a rapport to go somewhere and cash out big. So maybe that's good if you're a Broncos fan. We're going to move to our next linebacker. So right now we gave you Blake Cashman, Josey Jewell. Now we're going to move into our next tier 2 linebacker, and that's Jerome Baker from Miami. He's coming off an injury year. He only played 13 games. When he did play, he had his usual. To me, I'm not a huge Jerome Baker fan because of just like his spike. It seems like he'll have those big games once every 3 or 4 games, and then you're kind of getting left hanging in the middle there with some 4s, some 5s. But especially earlier in his career, Jerome Baker was a solid linebacker. Solid source of tackles. We're talking about a guy who 2 years ago in 2021 had 5.5 sacks. This year he only had 1.5, so that those numbers were down. He only had 2 tackles for loss this year, which was ugly. He did have 2 interceptions, which was a nice bonus. He only had 1 of those over the last 2 years. And the tackles were down. He only had 78 there for Miami. And to me, that's a little bit surprising because it's not like, they signed like a Zaire Franklin, Alex Singleton, somebody to soak up all the tackles. So I'm wondering if there was like a scheme change, something that attributes to that. For me,
I got to think so. I think just what they did with that defensive line and focusing on their safeties, Holland and Elliott. I think that's how the scheme was actually originally built when the former New England coach that's now their coach, because Baker was already there. That wasn't one of his draft picks, right?
Yeah, you're correct.
Right. So I think Jerome Baker, which I'm a Ohio State fan, but I'll tell you what, man, he hasn't been on one of my rosters since he has entered the league. If I ended up with him, it's because he slipped so far. I'm like you. That's kind of ironic that you brought that up. I've not been a huge fan of him either, and that's kind of tough coming out of Ohio State. But I try to warn people about Chase Young too, showing up for the big games a bit, not long term. So, anyways, when it comes to Baker, man, I think he might be done in Miami. What do you think?
I absolutely think he's done. We're talking about a Miami team who is second worst, the second of the worst location as far as cap room. They are negative by far, 50 million, held up there. So right. I don't see, we're talking about a team that has Tyreek Hill, that's Christian Wilkins, maybe he gets a franchise tag. He's a free agent. They got $30 million tied up with Tyreek Hill. So Miami does, as much as people say like things won't change, something's got to change, right? Because they're dead. They have no space. They have no room. Of course, they got to get rid of guys and then find other guys while losing money. So
right.
By default, unfortunately, I think Jerome Baker's out. I think he's done there.
Yeah.
I think he's part of the old regime. That's one of the players they save cap room and get him gone, let him go.
And a little tidbit too, if you're looking around, so we're looking at Spot Track for this contract information, and they technically have him down as a free agent, but he did restructure his contract this past year when they made the Chubb move and all that. So he's kind of lingering around. He might not be referred to as a true free agent just yet, but basically it's like some kind of deal or paper has to be signed. And I think he's due like 12 or 14 million or something if he plays this year based off what he made last year. Mm-hmm. It's more like if he's on the roster, so he's expected to be cut or released, or he's really going to have to restructure it. I got a feeling that restructure would have to be, a huge cut that he's probably not willing to make. This would be his first time trying the free agent market. He's probably better off.
Yeah, I think so too. And you know what? We talked about a team in Tier 1 before who we said, should be looking at every linebacker top to bottom, and that's Philadelphia Eagles. And me personally, like I kind of have a feeling I could see him wearing that Eagles green. I don't know about you, but I think that
fits the mold. Fits the mold. Yeah, you just nailed it, man. The way, and the funny thing about Philadelphia, I used to make fun of them. I got tired of saying it over the last 5 years. Anytime you look at the contracts of Philadelphia's inside linebackers, man, it's always ranked like the bottom 3 or something. They pay beans to their linebackers. That whole situation looked like it might have changed when they just drafted that rookie a couple of years ago, Brown or whatever. Yeah, they couldn't stay healthy this past year, but as in them putting a lot of money. So if they can find bargains, which Baker might find himself in, he's not been, I guess you could say, an elite player, far from it. So it's hard to say. A team's going to have to like him, I think, to make him a good offer. I kind of look at him and Cody Barton the same, which you've got listed here in your Tier 2.
You know what? Like Cody Barton, and there's a couple guys like this in the league. If we look at the safety position, like Ryan Neal was also a guy like this. Man, if you're looking on Twitter, which I highly suggest when you're like looking at start sits and waiver wire pickups, like Twitter is just so immediate. So I use Twitter a lot. But when you look up Cody Barton's name, man, it's just people, whether it was in Seattle, whether it was here in Washington, it's just people mad at him. Like, man, this guy gets beaten coverage. He's just getting torched. He might find a video of him like falling before he's making a tackle and miss that tackle, like ugly stuff. You know what? But with Cody Barton, like what you can't look past is the tackles, man. To me, like even if you're you don't have to be the sexiest player, and Cody Barton is not that. But the floor that he had with tackles, especially towards the end of the year this year, I don't think it can be ignored. That's why I had he was my write-in along with Blake Cashman. Like Cody Barton was the guy that I'm like, I want on this list just because those tackles. The last 4 weeks of the regular season, which they had Washington had a bye week 14. So weeks 13, 15 through 17, he had all 4 of those games with over at least 10 tackles. So really, to me, like, this is as good as it gets for Cody Barton, and I'm hoping he gets re-signed there. Just to bring back a familiar face. I don't think it's a guarantee. It's far from a guarantee, but Cody Barton is somebody who can eat up snaps and make tackles. Doesn't get sacks. He's not a playmaker. He's just literally there to gobble up snaps and make tackles. And if a team's looking for that, and if he gets signed. If he gets signed to Houston, like to me, he's an afterthought. He's just another guy, right? Because it's like they have a log jam there. But if he goes somewhere where there's opportunity, like Cody Barton is to me at least a streamer level with upside, and not in the sense of upside of like sacks or great play, but just heavy tackles. And you know what? Take it with a grain of salt because he was playing for like Washington, which is a bad team. And a lot of times we see like these good linebackers in fantasy play for like bad teams, kind of like Shaq Leonard, when he was a rookie as Darius Leonard, one of my favorite players, man, in Indy. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to take this guy. I never even heard of him, but I like him because I think we're going to be bad that year, and it was a good recipe. And to me, like that was the Cody Barton effect this year for him.
I think the interesting thing about Cody Barton when he was signed to Washington this past season was the fact that they didn't have any idea that they were going to take their two main pass rushers, known as good pass rushers, and trade them halfway through the season because the season would be, I guess, looking that bad. That was kind of where if you put Cody Barton behind a defensive line as a whole and it stayed a hole the whole entire season, we might not be seeing quite as much hate on Cody Barton. I'm not a super fan of Cody Barton's myself. I hadn't trusted him a lot, but there's one thing that we got to remember that people in the NFL are looking at, and that's a veteran presence of a guy that can run a defense. And if he run a defense, and if he ran Riviera's defense especially, that holds a lot of value. So this guy could land a second job, if not back in Washington, starting somewhere, say Seattle. I think we mentioned them in Tier 2 episode when we was talking about Jordan Brooks. Reunions happen, and to come in and kind of be a stopgap, that's kind of where he's at, in my opinion. Whether it's in Washington or somewhere else, there's going to be value. And as long as the guy is just like this past year on Washington or on another roster, if they say that he's a starter, you've got to buy into it because he does produce when he's on the field. Simple.
That's right. Over the last 2 years, and it's a nice thing that we said about that Seattle reunion. That last year for Seattle, he did have 2 sacks. This year he had none. Maybe that's team play. Maybe that's scheme. Maybe it's whatever reason.
Yeah, but and people listening to me right now or us right now, maybe, oh no, yeah, that's probably not. Hey, Wagner went to LA and went home. So don't tell me. Cody Barton was drafted in Seattle. It's very well possibility that's where he's, his family, he's only been in Washington for 1 year. I'm sure he didn't uproot everything out of, Seattle. So, weirder things have happened.
Yeah, I think, what was he, a Utah guy, I want to say? I think he's from over West Coast. So that's a familiar return for him. Over the last 2 years, the numbers speak for themselves. 257 tackles over the last 2 years. I mentioned Josey Jewell, short tackler. He was at 236. So Cody Barton, out tackling even Josey Jewell. So to me, I think all the stars aligned for Cody Barton to have a great year, and it happened, and I'm glad it did. He's not the sexiest player, but if he's, considered a starter, this is definitely somebody in especially tackle heavy formats that you're taking heed of.
I want to let you go ahead. You're going to hit up Willie Gay and Drue Tranquill. Now, this is intriguing to me that how you got him here at the listed in this tier 2, and it's going to be the last 2 that we talk about, I guess, in this tier.
Yeah,
I'd like to. Can you give me a combination? Just roll them together here. I'd like to hear your take on both of them as a whole, man. I know this is going to be hot.
So, to me, like Willie Gay is a player who doesn't make this cut. We talked about some guys that didn't make this cut. I took them out. That was Nick Morrow, Tyrell Dodson from Buffalo. Also, we didn't mention Jacob Phillips, who's somebody who did well a little bit there in Cleveland. He's a free agent. So to me, like when I went in, when I said, hey, Gary, Willie Gay is on this list. To me, it wasn't because of the type of player that he is, or it wasn't, his track record. To me, it's just 2 things, and that's youth. And I'm praying, I'm hoping for a change of scenery. Because Willie Gay, let's be honest, for fantasy, especially purposes, has not been pretty. He has not lived up to the hype of the selection that he was just a few years ago. We talk about a guy who should be getting sacks. He only got 1 sack this year. Right. I think Willie Gay is a good player. I think he has good potential. I think it's a product of environment with him. I just think he needs a fresh scene. I don't think we've seen the best of Willie Gay. He's kind of been like asked to do a role, like, hey, do this role on campus. City's defense. They're great. Like you don't have to expect so much out of him. He's doing that role, but it doesn't lead to like much fantasy love. It's a
tough position for him on Andy Reid's defense. He's not necessarily put in that type where we got Snead, you got Justin Reed, you got Nick Bolton. Just how that defense is built. Willie Gay was not set up to succeed. And unfortunately, I thought that he was going to be on the uprise. I thought, was this his third, fourth year? The way that he kind of finished last year, I was looking forward. Hey, it's a contract year, and I really thought. And then, the Chargers got all stingy and let Drue Tranquill sign with Kansas City for beans when they should have re-signed his ass instead of signing Kendricks. Then they probably would be a lot better shape right now heading into this new regime. But, that's why I'm not a Chargers fan after all those years after they moved, that was my final straw. I'm not going to hash that out. But either way, I got to agree. A change may do Willie Gay. And again, we're deep on the list. I think there's really like 16. I might have mentioned 16 free agent inside linebackers that are really worth talking about in this aspect. And Willie Gay still has to be in that conversation. Again, has it just been lack of opportunity? Period. It's kind of how it feels. It's a weird situation. Hard to gauge. When it comes to Drue Tranquill, man, can we see Drue Tranquill back and not Willie Gay? Could that be a new thing?
I think that's the way it's going to go. They still have some
right
over there in Kansas City. I mean, Mike Dana needs paid. There's other guys that need paid too. And I think they prioritize like the Willie Sneads, the Trent McDuffies, like over a guy like Jordan or like Willie Gay. So to me, I don't think he gets resigned. But it's a good prelude. He needs a good change of scenery. So I'm hoping that's where it goes. And the big takeaway for me is if this is redraft, he's not on my list. I'm not sticking my neck out for him and saying like, hey, we got to talk about Willie Gay. But because of this dynasty, he's still young. If he goes, he's projected, I think, $7 million on Spot Track to make a year his market value. If he goes somewhere on like a 2-3 year contract to the right team in the right situation, like I'm basically here to say Willie Gay, if you have him, I wouldn't drop him yet in Dynasty because wait till the offseason, wait to see where he goes, what stars align. I think there are better days ahead with Willie Gay as much as he has made you mad. But with Drue Tranquill, on the other hand, I do think that this is somebody they look to resign. Drue Tranquill is coming off a solid year as more or less a role player. We saw him kind of step up when Nick Bolton went down basically at the beginning of the season, right? So we got a good taste of Drue Tranquill. He was in tier 1. I mentioned, players who had 5 or more sacks with 100+ tackles. He was on that list last year. Mm-hmm. So to him, like, go to Kansas City, I thought like maybe, this is the year they kind of have 2 good linebackers. Nope. Had to take a Nick Bolton injury, for him to get fantasy love. But I like Drue Tranquill. I unfortunately I wanted to see him go somewhere where he can like flourish and really put all those pieces together. But this is a good fit for him, and we're talking like real life. This is a business, right? So I think the Chiefs, he's somebody who's excelled in Steve Spagnuolo's offense. I think they look to bring him back. This is somebody who can cover really well. Was a former safety in college at Notre Dame. Somebody who's very versatile, and that's another thing too. Like, I don't see another team like jumping to give him a 2 or 3 year deal. He's 28. Like, you have to factor in the athletic prowess, and is that going to be there in 3 or 4 years? I don't know. But for right now, what he's asked to do, I think, he's a great fit in the organization. And to me, if he stays there, I'm not really too invested in him for fantasy football for IDP, like until he has some like standalone, snaps with Nick Bolton there. But if we're talking like if you have hesitancy on Nick Bolton and he gets hurt, like, yeah, Drue Tranquill's he's what he was in LA all of a sudden. He's getting sacks. Mm-hmm. He blitzes, he rushes the passer, does a really good job in pass coverage, makes tackles. So like, yeah, this is kind of like Ernest Jones, one man in the backfield making plays. He can be that guy. It's just they don't seem to want to play 2 linebackers, and right. Nick Bolton's still there. But to me, it's like if he gets on this reserve role again, I'm not drafting him. I'm not paying, too much attention, but I think there's an off chance that he goes somewhere else. And if he went to somewhere else, say like Arizona, and was the number 2 behind like Kaiser White, man, I think he could be really elevated. That's why I wanted to pay respects to Drue Tranquill here.
Oh yeah, I can see it, man. I love it. I like Drue Tranquill too, man. Again, there's a little bit of a grudge here. I don't know what the Chargers were thinking, and Kansas City sure got a freaking good deal this year, considering how late he was signed and how cheap they got him for. So it's a really interesting situation with Willie Gay and Drue Tranquill this year. I got to ask you if there's anybody off of here that you think would be a hot dart throw for somebody to pick up just to see where they might land. Who do you think has any upside whatsoever? Now, we're probably talking more of a standard size league, folks. So,
what I'd say, depending on your depth of the league, how many managers, like Blake Cashman is definitely an intriguing player. To me, like, waiting out, this is early in the offseason, wait them out, see what goes on in Houston. Like, I really think their defense put all the pieces together. Their team more or less put all the pieces together. And I think if they like kind of just stay put where they're at, like Blake Cashman, if he's not already owned, is somebody who's definitely I'm recommending. Also, Josey Jewell, like if you have him, don't cut him. He could be brought back and, pick up where he left off. He can go somewhere else and still provide those tackles. Mm-hmm. So those two guys are, to me, like, if they're out there, go and get them. And I just want to say, too, I don't want to, with Jerome Baker, too, like I'm not going to stick my neck out and say, go pick him up. But I think like a change of scenery, man, like that's another thing about him. He's still young, too. He's still somebody that can get it done is a linebacker. I think a change of scenery, like I feel almost like, he's an AFC North. I would like to see him somewhere in that AFC North. I think he'd be really good there too. But Jerome Baker, don't completely forget about him. Like what he did his rookie year. Hopefully he goes to somewhere where, more opportunities are for him. So, all these guys are on this list for a reason, whether it be on tier 1 or tier 2. Tier 2 is basically saying, hey, don't cut yet, hang on, stay put and wait a couple more weeks at least until and we're, like I said, this is early in the offseason. We're going to be here. Gary and I are going to talk about other IDP positions as well. We're going to come back. This isn't the only time we'll talk about these free agent linebackers. We'll come back to them. So I just wanted to make that point, and I hope you really enjoyed what we gave you tonight. We really take pride in what we do here, and this is something that's new for the IDP Plus network. So we're going to try to make it consistent and be here for you guys to give you the best fantasy advice for IDP leagues. So I want to thank Gary for being my co-host tonight. I look forward to being back on the next time we are together, and I want to wish all my free agent linebackers the best landing spots. Bring those fantasy tackles in because I'm ready for it. Go to Trophy Smack in the meantime in the offseason now. Get a trophy.
Get set up for next year. If nothing else, you get you a damn ring and trophy ahead of it. They'll print 2024-25 champion.
And if we missed anything, put it in the comments. Tell us why they should be on this list. Give us ideas. Give us something you want to see because we read your comments. We take heed of that. So I appreciate you rocking with us tonight. Enjoy, stay blessed, and stay healthy.
Bye.
Thank you for watching this IDP Guys video. If you like this content and you want more fantasy football content, click here. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos to help you master your IDP league, click here to subscribe.